Hey Andertons, I just want to say a big thank you for having me as part of this Elevenses series. It's a great honour. I thought I would do something which involves sort of like producing a piece of music that isn't too long, just a little clip, because I typically do these sort of videos for Instagram. So I thought I'd play some guitar and record stuff and maybe have a natter about how I do it. I'm very sorry that this is a few days late. I've broken the wonderful Elevenses schedule. I'm very, very sorry, and thank you to Andertons for kindly allowing me to still be part of it. The reason being, I actually caught coronavirus just from a single 30-minute exposure at a supermarket, being a really strict self-isolator. So if anything, it's just a reminder of these crazy times, and I was just completely out of energy for about 2 weeks, which knocked me way back in terms of filming this video. But thank you, I'm back on my feet, hopefully, getting there. So thank you for having me again. So yeah, I thought I would maybe just talk a little bit about tone. This was actually where I was going to go with it. I wasn't actually intending originally to do a piece of music, but I thought might as well, because it sort of shows off what I'm trying to talk about and explain anyway, which is tone and how to record electric guitars. So the guitar tone that you probably hear in there, I'm going to talk mostly about the lead tone. It's pretty straightforward. I have a Fender 59 reissue. This is an American vintage series Stratocaster. It's all stock as far as I'm aware. I bought it used. It's been the best Strat that I've ever used, in fact. I absolutely adore it. Massive chunky neck, 7¼ inch radius, vintage radius, skinny vintage frets. So it's quite a handful to play, but I've had to obviously raise the action pretty high to be able to bend on it still. But man alive, this thing has mojo, so I thought I would play it in this video. I am running into a beautiful amplifier called the Sine Wave Syndrive. It's a 100 watt 46L6 power section monster, and it's basically a clean to mild overdrive amp. And I have it set super. The actual guitar chain is really simple. It's this guitar into an overdrive pedal, which is called the J Rocket. It's discontinued now, the J Rocket lead boots, I believe. And that goes into a Sine Wave 100 watt Syndrive, which is a custom order, custom spec. If you guys are a fan of 2-rock amps, think in the same sort of ballpark. I actually do have a 2-rock and I have a Sine Wave as well, but in this video I use the Sine Wave on the overdrive channel, which is hardly overdriving at all. It's just basically a little bit of creaminess, and I find that it like adds this lower mid-range richness to the tone that I really love. So even when I'm tracking cleans, I typically run it through the drive channel, just back off the gain, and then if I want drive, I obviously switch that back up. So that's the guitar side done. It's pretty simple. I find the best way to do this, when it comes to recording guitar, the best way to do it is to sort of just get the best tone you can in the room, be happy in the room, make sure it's all perfect in the room as a listener, and then you basically got to try and capture that. I have a very simple technique here. In this video I used a single microphone. It's an SE-VR1, which is a passive ribbon mic with a figure of 8 pickup pattern. It's pretty much placed just on center, on sort of like a horizontal plane, flat on axis with the cone, but a little beneath the dust cap. So you're catching mostly the dust cap, but a little bit off the bottom of it as well. The reason being is I like dark guitar tones, so my tone is already quite dark, so I can afford to have a ribbon mic quite close to the dust cap, and it still won't be bright or shrill. Then after the microphone, it's quite straightforward actually. I'm running through some hardware here just because I'm lucky enough to have some, but you can do all of this with plugins in your favourite DAW of choice. I'm going into a AML 1073 preamp, which is basically a British-made clone of a Neve 1073, which has a built-in EQ module. So I'm not afraid to EQ things. I like to get it right going into the computer, but I'm not afraid to EQ what comes off the microphone. That's just me personally. So I've shelved off a load of low end just to get some clarity there, and then a tiny boost at, let's see, 4.8K, literally half a dB, and the Neve has what's called the airband. I've given it 1 dB of the airband, which I believe is like, I want to say it's like a shelf that comes in from like 7 or 8K or maybe 10K, I'm not sure. That's it, pretty straightforward on that. Then, there's a couple more bits. I go into a compressor. So I'm recording, this is another thing, I'm recording a 100 watt amplifier. It's a loud amp through a 1x12 Tone Tubby speaker, beautiful Tone Tubby Amsterdam. And I'm not playing loud at all. It's so quiet that I can talk over it very comfortably. People might think I'm nuts. The main reason I do it is, even though I never get complaints because I'm lucky I'm in a little semi-detached house, I still want to be able to track at like 4 in the morning if I want to. So at the moment I've got that set really quite quiet, and to be honest, you get a huge full body tone regardless. If you crank it, of course it'll open up more, but it still sounds great is the moral of the story. So I'm recording quite quiet, hence I have a compressor that comes after the preamp. It's a AML 2254, which is, the compressor is an AML 54F50, same company, British made, clone of a Neve 2254, the vintage ones, which are very, very hard to come by. It's a very fat 4 transformer loaded compressor, very squishy. I have that set to a slow attack and auto release, and a ratio of 2:1 at the moment. The threshold's right down, so I am compressing quite a fair bit. I'm probably getting, I'd say, anything from sort of, well, it depends what you consider a fair bit, anything from sort of 4 to 6, 4 to 7 dB gain reduction there. That then goes into a Pultec clone. It's all clones here because I haven't got the original, sadly, but they're still wonderful units. A Pultec clone, which is a tube-driven EQ. I then whack in a little bit of saturation by putting a plus 6 dB boost on the Pultec, and I'm adding a little bit of low end, so I'm adding, say, 4 dB at 100. It's a weird thing, like you might think it's weird because I took out some lows in the preamp, but I'm adding them back in with the Pultec. Simply, they have a different character, so I really like the sound of this. So I've got about 4 dB of 100 hertz dialed in on the Pultec, and at 7K I'm putting in about 6.5 dB and really super broad Q, so it's just lifts. That's what the Pultec EQ will do, a Pultec style EQ will do. I should say you can obviously get plugins that are very, very good, that emulate the Pultec perfectly. I've just got hardware here. I then have, I find that Strats sometimes have an upper mid-range nasal frequency around 3-ish, 3K. So I've removed about 3 dB at 3K on the Pultec as well. Again, adding plus 6 dB, so I'm driving the tubes pretty hard, but they're not distorting, they just glue and saturate. And then that goes into yet another compressor, another clone, a Warm Audio WA76, which is basically an 1176, but a modern version actually. I find this sound even smoother than, I've beat it against a Yuri and found it sounded somewhat smooth compared to the Yuri. It's not as in your face and bitey. Anyway, so I have that set to a relatively fast attack and a fast release, with a 4:1 compression ratio, and doing anything from about 3 to 4 dB of gain reduction. But the way I have it set is that it's just catching what the slow compressor at the beginning missed. So it just ties in the thing a little bit more. I find this chain sounds super beautiful and classy and fat, while still maintaining loads of high-end articulation, no irritating mid-range nasality or anything like that. You can replicate every single thing that I've said here in software quite easily. If you want a good plugin that emulates the 54F50 compressor, I'd say Waves V-Comp is absolutely superb. Waves also make the PwigTech, I believe, which is a Pultec type clone for the Pultec, and obviously the CLA plugins, Chris Lordell's signature plugins that emulate his 1176s will do an 1176 very nicely. Otherwise, UAD have a suite of stuff that does exactly the same stuff, exactly the same thing. So that's basically my chain for recording guitar. I know it sounds complicated, but if you see what I've done, I'm not actually doing very much on the guitar side. I get the guitar tones super simple. There's very little in the chain. There's a single overdrive pedal that's hardly doing anything into a very mildly overdriven amp, so it's quite a cleanish overdrive. It's a creamy overdrive. Reverb is off. I like to record guitars dry. Figure of 8 VR1, SE VR1 ribbon microphone into the chain that I mentioned before. I don't know if that's cool. For me, I'm a recording guy. I love this stuff. I should also say, by the way, God, that's bypassing a very critical step. All of that goes into this old Midas console here, which has a color of its own, and from there, I've got a send, sent to my tape machine behind me. So it's all recording to tape. I just absolutely adore the tape machine. It adds this harmonic squishiness, but rich harmonic mids. I find my machine actually lifts the high end despite what everyone else says about tape. Maybe the way I have it aligned. It's a 1/2 inch, but I'm using a single track. It's a 1/2 inch quadraphonic, but I'm using one track to record the guitars at 15 IPS on ATR Magnetics Studio Master tape. And that goes into Pro Tools. Of course, there's a little delay, so I then I'm recording simultaneously, recording digital straight from all of this chain, and I'm recording tape at the same time so that I can just align them and then get rid of the digital one and go with the tape. Yeah, I hope that helps. The track was just all sorts of stuff, whatever I could think of. Guitars, a little Korg Minilog XD analog synth, which did some of the weird sounds in there. I have a grand piano downstairs, which is crazy. So I did this thing for the bass where I sort of like just pinched one of the bass strings and then hammered the bass strings, and I recorded it on the iPhone's voice note app because I was super lazy and I wanted something kind of grungy and lo-fi. Yeah, and then Machina MK3 for all the rest of the sounds really, which was just the drums. Everything else was, oh, and a bass. I have a very, very cheap bass guitar here, which is, I absolutely love it. I don't even know what it is. It's not even Ibanez, because Ibanez won't even put their name on it. It's the Soundgear SDGR 5-string. It's an active bass. Has a great neck pickup tone. So I play bass through a very similar chain to how I record the guitar, except DI. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed that. I don't know if my waffling was useful to you or not. Yeah, thank you again to Andertons for having me as part of this series, and yeah, hope to see you guys soon.